Welcome, everyone, to the Tuesday edition of the RotoWire NFL podcast, of course, brought to you by Circa Sports. I'm Joe Bartel. Alongside me every Tuesday now moving forward is Jake Letarski. Today, we're going to be talking about sleeper guys, and I think everyone's terminology for that word, it gets overused, certainly in the fantasy community. Jake and I are targeting players outside of the top 100 that you should be having in every one of your rosters, and we're going even a little bit further. Jake went all the way, it feels like, in the terms of finding sleeper guys, so excited to get right on into it. Again, welcome everyone to the Tuesday edition of the RotoWire NFL podcast brought to you by Circa Sports. I'm Joe Bartel. You can follow me at JB Fantasy Sports on Twitter. You can follow Jake at RotoJake. Last week, we talked about Dynasty startup overall tips and tricks. We went through a few of our players. We referenced our Twitter pages far too often in accordance to that draft that had taken place. Normally, every Tuesday during the season, we're going through all the waiver wire pickups. But during this time period, we've really done a lot of the evergreen start and sits, sort of your basic conversations and questions that I think most fantasy experts do at this time of the year. And we are really leaning into that with our sleeper coverage this go around, which is fine. I mean, I think for a lot of folks at this point, we're talking about July 30th. We're 2 days till the start of August, which is officially fantasy football season for a lot of folks, and training camps already happened. You might have slept through things. You might not have really been paying attention for a lot of the moves, and you might not be aware of some of the language that's coming out of training camp. So that's what we're doing here with these sleeper guys. And I think they're not name brand enough for you to roll your eyes and laugh at the concept of sleeper. I think we did a good job, more or less.
Yeah, exactly. You see every single podcast out there will do a sleeper show, right? And everybody has a different definition for what that means. But yeah, Joe, like you said, you hit it on the head. It's July 30th here. If you've done a redraft league already, I don't advise doing that. But that's why we stick to some of the, like you said, the evergreen. Last week we talked mostly about concepts. This week we'll actually get into players, and hopefully players that we'll see will be correct and will rise in ADP. There's a couple of them that I think are incorrectly placed in ADP, and at least by getting these names on your radar now, if you do have early drafts, you can capitalize on guys whose stock is going to change closer to the draft, or just guys to keep on your radar or your watch list for a variety of formats. So ready to get after it, Joe.
Yeah, and while it is MLB trade deadline, there's lots of news going on in the baseball world. There was a decent amount of news from the football perspective. We're going to get to that, but first, word from our sponsors here, Circa Sports. Circa Million and Survivor are back and bigger than ever with $16 million in total prizes. You enter Nevada, but you can play from anywhere. Entries are open until September 7th at 2 p.m. You sign up at Circa Resort and Casino in Las Vegas. And of course, the Circa Million has the top prize of $1 million and $6 million in total prizes. You pick 5 teams against the spread every week. Quarterly and full season payouts. We've heard all this stuff before, but 100% payback to the players. Circa Survivor will have that prize pool of at least $10 million guaranteed. And all you have to do is try to pick a winner each week. And go about 20 weeks here. Select one team each week straight up. Each team can only be used once throughout the season. Go to circasports.com/contest to learn more about that today. And again, I mentioned the news. The biggest one would have been Robin Wilson was carted off with an apparent leg injury. Of course, the third round pick for the Steelers after Deontay Johnson was traded to the Panthers. There was some thought that the Steelers, and I think that was before the draft or right around there, would invest heavily in the receiver position, that they really only added a third-round pick, of course, with the Michigan pedigree that Roman Wilson did. It was interesting, though.
Well, and it was a third-round pick that I believe was, from what I read, is someone whose stock was kind of slipping. They thought he was going to be a speed guy because his size is a little bit, understated there, and then he ended up being like the 6th fastest receiver at the combine, which definitely lowered his stock, because the expectation was that he would be one of the fastest. So you got a guy whose stock was downgraded anyway, wasn't probably on ADP radar for your standard 12-team leagues. I mean, 199 in NFFC right now, so nothing too crazy there. So then the depth chart just gets interesting after this. You mentioned, a lot of people haven't kept up to date on offseason moves. Deontay Johnson is in Carolina right now, so that means George Pickens is the top guy, and there's definitely room for growth on that depth chart there. Van Jefferson is who we list as number 2 right now. The classic Rams, every once in a while shows up. We probably talk about him on the waiver wire show, then disappears for a couple of weeks. Kelvin Austin's still around. Quez Watkins, Scotty Miller. Us Packer fans remember Scotty Miller very well. But, I mean, looking at this alignment, Roman Wilson was already in danger of being like the speed decoy, right?
Right.
And that's pretty much what Quez Watkins will step up and do if anything is different, because that's kind of what he was in Philadelphia, another speedy guy. So
And same for Scotty Miller too. I mean, they
yeah.
all kind of have the same concept. You could search by Madden speed and get Quez Watkins and Scotty Miller right at the top. But I would agree with you. It's one of the reasons why George Pickens is probably one of my favorite guys. In a redraft, like your ESPN Yahoo formats, maybe it's a 4th or 5th round guy. In Underdog now, his ADP has jumped up almost to the mid 3rd, late 3rd, 4th round, which might be justified. But how many receivers do you really want in the Arthur Smith, Russell Wilson led Steelers offense? Not many is probably the answer. So that Roman Wilson gets injured, I don't think really impacts things too much from my perspective. Same with you?
Yeah, I agree. This doesn't really shift the fantasy radar much for me. It's mostly for deeper and dynasty formats.
Yeah, sticking along the same lines, Joe Mixon will not play in Thursday's preseason game. If this is your first time hearing there is preseason football, yay, I think. For
Thursday
you,
Hall of Fame game.
That is it. We have now officially made to the final week of the rest of the year where there's not football of some professional level occurring. Now you could debate what is the Hall of Fame game in terms of professional football, but again, 2 football teams are playing. Joe Mixon will not be part of that. Dameon Pierce is going to get a lot of the workload, which will be really interesting. Because if Pierce is,
I don't know if he'll get a lot of the workload in the Hall of Fame game. Did they already?
Yeah, there was like he's getting the majority of the workload in that.
Yeah, I mean that surprises me a little bit because I'm pretty sure both teams are just not going to play starters, and Dameon Pierce actually getting a lot of the workload. Okay, so extensive action expected Thursday. Yeah, I totally missed that. I wouldn't have expected that. That, if anything, that actually worries me if he's expendable enough to throw out for a bunch of action in the Hall of Fame game. I traded a 4th round pick in a dynasty league for Dameon Pierce just because I have Joe Mixon. But I'm starting to think, what was I getting out of a 4th round pick anyway? But, right. I mean, after Mixon, it's Pierce, Daria Gumbawale, Jawar Johnson, Cam Akers, some retreads that are back there.
Right.
If anything, that worries me about the status of Pierce's role as a backup.
Yeah, and it's going to lean into a bit more of our sleeper conversation later on the show because it's exactly that reason why I think there's a few running backs out there currently that might be backups for their team, but might not be on that team come the end of August after preseason. So we'll see. Absolutely. If Pierce goes crazy, then I think it's an easy question as to who's the backup and probably raises his value a little bit more because Joe Mixon is expected to be such a prominent factor in offense. It's going to be among the league's best.
And in general, everyone overreacts to a good preseason game anyway, right? Because everyone's got to overanalyze the only bit of football that's going on. Yep. So it'll be interesting to see where that slides.
Sticking with the backup conversation, Royce Freeman has been listed as number 2 back for the Cowboys now in the early portions of training camp. It's notable because technically Zeke makes his 1-year hiatus from New England back to Dallas, is already listed as a starter. Rico Dowdle, who a lot of people liked last year, already on the back burner. We have Deuce Vaughn, who's got some nepotism stuff going on with his spot on the Cowboys roster. That Royce Freeman, I mean, we've
Malik
talked about
Davis is around
on waiver wire podcasts in past years. I kind of like that, but it is Royce Freeman, a vagabond retread of the NFL that is now the backup supposedly over Rico Dowdle, at least early portions of training camp.
Yeah, obviously Dowdle had some dynasty value last year as a rookie with the future of that whole entire backfield uncertain. But now that team, just rewinded another couple of years here. So, we'll see. I mean, Dowdle takes a hit in dynasty. Dowdle probably doesn't get taken in redraft anymore, and it's as simple as that.
Right. And then you had some breaking news that I actually haven't even seen. You want to get the audience ready for that one?
Oh, yeah. So I looked at our latest news page. I don't think it's serious, but Chris Olave exited practice with an apparent hip injury. At this stage, all you can say is it'll probably limit him for the preseason, which he'll be limited for anyway. And then we recently got a note on Zamir White from Las Vegas. He is entrenched as the Raiders' top running back, according to Vince Bonsignor of the Las Vegas Review-Journal. Sorry if I butchered that name there. But I mean, that situation is obviously going to be in flux, but as of right now, July 30th, it looks like Zamir White is atop the depth chart over the likes of Alexander Madison, Amir Abdullah, Dylan Lobb, the rookie 6th-round draft pick, who has apparently looked pretty sharp too early in camp here. So this is a team that is not going to be very good, and a set of running backs that is very much going to be a crapshoot. I mean, Zamir White, what are we looking at here for his ADP? 76? I guess he's being drafted as if he is going to be the starter anyway, so I'm not necessarily sure this changes anything about his stock or his outlook.
No, I would agree with you. And I've done so many of the underdog best balls throughout the year. Normally a seventh, eighth round guy, I would imagine in redraft by the end of August, it's hey, very clear starting running back. Like DeAndre Swift and James Conner and Najee Harris are, but they all have sort of backups or injury concerns. You're sort of attracted to the unknown. And certainly towards the latter half of last season, the way the Raiders played and how Antonio Pierce wants to use that running game, I could see how Zamir might jump into the early seventh round, late sixth round. I don't know if he should. I think the Raiders offense might be one of the worst in the league, and I don't really want a running back in that scenario, but he's younger and hasn't hurt people. And I think that does matter. Whether it should or shouldn't, I think it does, at least in our industry. So I'll be really curious to see what his end of August ADP ends up being for Zamir White. Harry Thompson's trying to send me Zamir White in a trade in our Dynasty League, Jake, not our one, a different one. So that's always a little bit concerning because Harry's really smart about a lot of stuff. So if he
We're in two different dynasty leagues together, and this is a different one. Okay, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
What does that say about our lives?
That we live great lives, Jake. What are you talking
exactly.
about? Let's take a break, get a word from our sponsors, Blue Wire, and then we'll come back with our sleeper candidates again. Guys outside the top 100 for the most part, but even a little bit later on, players you can really throw darts on for your drafts. Okay, we're back in again talking sleeper picks overall for your positions. Jake, we didn't really have so much of a framework for it, but I think we ended up going 2 running backs, 2 receivers, and then a bunch of other dart throws. Or was it 3 running backs, 3 receivers? I forget how.
Yeah, well, so I knew a couple of yours heading in, so I wanted to pick a running back and a receiver, and then essentially what we did is we did two sleepers that are outside of the top 100 in ADP, right? Anyone inside the top 100, nobody's sleeping on these guys anymore. Even guys that are close to the top 100 are going to be on the radar and they're going to be drafted. There may be guys we think you should draft a little bit higher than they currently are. And then we did a third sleeper for each of us. I called it a super sleeper outside of our 12-team ADP range. Somebody that probably isn't getting drafted in 12-team ADP ranges, or in 12-team leagues, but could be drafted as a late stash or could be an early season pickup. Somebody to kind of keep on your radar or your watch list. And then we loosely discussed this. It was a long weekend for me. I saw Fish at Alpine Valley on Sunday, so we didn't get to talk about the pod until yesterday afternoon. But we decided to do long shots, like dart throws. I was like 16-teamer or deep dynasty leagues, guys that are, really, really long shots for the end. But I don't know. We had fun with it. There's hopefully some deep league guys.
At the end with that
he cheated. I've got some guys that are in between 450 and 550 in ADP here because this is our opportunity to be literally the only person who mentioned this guy's name on a preseason podcast, right? So
you're right.
We'll have some fun with it here, but we'll get some more traditional value kicking off the top. And you want to go first with your running back? Your outside of the top 100 running back?
Yeah, and it's a guy that I probably have a 30% roster share in my best balls and might have even more in redraft by the end of things, but I think Blake Corum is seriously undervalued for what he could be. And I come from a dynasty angle of things, Jake, where I do a lot of that stuff, certainly in the offseason. I do a lot of the rookie conversation. I ended up writing the article on the site when Blake Corum was taken. We did betting odds on this. I mean, there was a real possibility Blake Corum was going to be the first running back off the board. It was really Corum or Jonathan Brooks. And, of course, Brooks goes in the second round to the Panthers. I'm saying all of this because I despise specific draft position conversation. People are so stupid when it comes to saying, oh, a third round pick has way more value than a fourth round pick running back that's drafted, when in reality, somebody could be drafted 96th overall, the last pick in the third round, and then 98th overall, the second pick in the fourth round. And we act as if that's so different. It's not. But in this example, where Corum is a third round pick and the Rams, who've needed a lot of draft pick stuff to replenish their roster over the years, I think that it really does matter. And that Corum's body type and kind of profile really matches Kyren Williams, I think is interesting too. I mean, how many injuries has Kyren Williams had over the years? I had to list it just to make sure I was following along. So we had already a leg injury that happened earlier this offseason. I don't know if it was a lower one that we don't have any injury reports, allows the Rams to kind of be coy about this stuff. But we had Kyren Williams have an ankle injury at the beginning of the season of his rookie year. He had a leg injury as well. And then you also had an ankle injury and then the broken foot or high ankle sprain last year too. So at minimum now, there are 5 lower body leg injuries of some sort for a undrafted 7th round pick, whatever it was, for Kyren Williams.
He missed
Corum is
weeks.
going to end up playing.
Yeah.
Corum's going to end up playing, and I think the draft capital matters in this instance that the Rams decided to invest in picks. I really think worst case scenario where you're drafting Corum outside the top 100, he's like what we did for Dalvin Cook and Alexander Madison for years. Well, if Dalvin Cook were to go down, Alexander Madison becomes a running back too. But I think what's going to actually happen is Blake Corum outright plays more than Kyren Williams, or at least does a 55-45 snap share. And Corum is going to be good in that instance and will get red zone opportunities because he's good at scoring.
So given this this mindset, Kyren Williams is just a total fade for you across the board, right? Because if you believe that, you should probably not have any Kyren Williams shares.
I have 0 Kyren Williams, and in fact, I've been saying since February when I've been doing the podcast with Nick that Devon Achane was the dumbest ADP at the time, was like a late first round, early second round. Now he's more like second, third round. And Kyren Williams is the next dumbest. And I will not be touching Kyren Williams at his third round price tag. I think it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's interesting. Kyren Williams missed weeks 7 through 11 last year. One of those games included a bye week. And you're right, that was the
he missed 5 weeks with that. I think he was a broken ankle or high ankle sprain.
It was an ankle injury, right? Yeah. And then he came back and was excellent.
Yep.
Missed week 18 just because. But then we have, you're right. There's a lot of off-season injuries. He went through a procedure on his hand. I'm scrolling through all these injuries here. And then he suffered a foot injury just while working out. Okay, so I guess I agree that's a little worrisome. I mean, I'm not quite as high on Corum as you are, but I'm going to have some shares, and I'll probably be low on Kyren Williams as well. Maybe not quite to the extreme, but
can we explain what you're not high on? Because I think that's the key. Do I think Blake Corum is a good running back prospect?
Yes.
No, I don't. So like next year, I'm up to date on this for the most part because I'm a freak with this stuff.
Yep.
The next year running back class is going to be nuts. There's probably 7 guys that I like more than Blake Corum this year that are coming out of next year's class. Does that mean that Blake Corum is a bad running back for fantasy? No. And I think in the Rams system, the way they seem to be prioritizing that sort of back, somebody smaller, quick, and has power in the case of Corum who can fall into the end zone, that's really interesting to me. And I think he's not just a backup, but a guy that's going to play and play enough.
Yeah, I mean, I could see a 60-40 times share between Williams and Corum that maybe starts to get closer, or Corum takes over at the end of the season. I think Kyren Williams is a little bit better than you're giving him credit for. Now, maybe there's some bias that's having him on several title-winning teams last year. That fantasy managers are definitely going to remember that. Kyren Williams is very capable, but I think the whole thing is we're going to see some kind of split, and I think it's going to be 60-40 Kyren early on, or maybe 65-35 is probably what I would presume, and it gets closer to 50-50 as the season moves along. But you're right, because of the Williams injuries, they need to spell him on occasion. So in a way, I like that Corum as a sleeper, I guess, because his floor is still getting work. So good for that. I'm not quite all the way in on this as you are. I know we gotta find our takes right and put a foot in the ground. That's not quite one where I'm gonna put my foot in the ground here, but I very much see the value in Corum.
I have been the only Kyren Williams stan, I think, at the RotoWire office for a long time. I think even when he came out of Notre Dame, he was going to be a pass-catching guy. I thought he looked really good in that capacity. I didn't envision what he did last year, but it's not surprising to me. So when I'm saying I think Blake Corum is going to be as good as Kyren Williams, it really isn't a knock on Kyren. I just think that there's a scenario that Kyren is going to be more receiving back, can do everything. But the Rams have already understood that with 5 lower leg injuries in 3 years, you can't depend on Kyren Williams to do everything like he did last year. It's just unattainable. So
that's fair.
Who's your guy?
Yeah. Okay. So, I'm not quite ready to put my foot down there. One place I am ready to put my foot down is that Chase Brown and Zach Moss should have their ADPs flipped, right? There's my foot stomp right there here. And it's not like it's a ton, right? Because Zach Moss is ADP 96 and Chase Brown is ADP 113. So it's not nearly as bold of a stance as yours, but I do think that come late August, they're going to have their ADPs flipped, and you can capitalize on that now. Now, of course, the Bengals signed Zach Moss after trading Joe Mixon this offseason. They signed him as a free agent. I'm wondering why, like RotoWire, us, and everybody else seems to just throw Zach Moss as the default number 1 on the depth chart over a guy that the Bengals drafted and that showed some pretty cool explosiveness last year. And I just so going back to the beginning here. Zach Moss failed for 3 years in Buffalo, right? And then he had a couple years in Indy, and he had a good year in Indy last year when Jonathan Taylor was hurt before going back to being the backup, right? So I don't know why we think that after 5 years in the league, he's suddenly a good lead back. for a team here. So I'm definitely siding with the rookie that the Bengals took. Also, the Zach Moss contract. 2 years, $8 million. That's not necessarily prohibitive. It's not like they gave him a huge pile of cash to make sure that he was ready to go there. I mean, Brown is younger, obviously. He's faster. Both are roughly the same size on paper, so it's not like one has a clear size advantage here. And I think the offense is just getting better. It's going to be better. I think that blonde Joe Burrow is healthy, and the offense, just on a whole, everyone's gonna, the rising tide's gonna lift everybody here. But I don't quite get why Zach Moss is ahead of Chase Brown. And I guess that's one area where you can possibly profit.
So Chase Brown was excellent towards the end of last season. We did many podcasts where we're talking about Chase Brown as a possible pickup if you were in your fantasy playoffs, and that Joe Mixon was banged up certainly by that point in the Bengals offense overall. Joe Burrow was done for the year, and Chase and Higgins were hampered just by bad situations. We got to see the best case of Chase Brown, but I don't know if Chase Brown is the full-time back. That's my bigger concern, and that's, I think, what the Bengals seem to identify when they signed Moss to a cheaper deal. 2 years for $8 million, so $4 million a year, is on par with what the NFL has deemed a starting running back. Singletary got that same money for the Giants. I think similar 2-year deal. David Montgomery might average a little bit more per year for the Lions, but that was on the low end for what they were looking for the running back. So it's not as if the Bengals said, hey, let's just get a backup. We'll sign him for $4 million. Like, Zach Moss at that price point is going to be a factor in their offense. And I kind of wonder if it's a very, very worse scenario of Zeke for the Cowboys and then Tony Pollard coming in as the backup. Like, that's the perfect scenario I envisioned for Chase Brown. But that has not been a very lucrative one if Tony Pollard was the starter for Dallas or now for Tennessee.
Yeah, I just think the Bengals saw, okay, Chase Brown, Travion Williams, Chris Evans, that's their running back room, right? They needed to get somebody in. And, maybe it's a starter, maybe not. But we do see that Chase Brown has been working with the starters a lot. Now, this could just be an experience level, from last year being another year in the system. But he has been, as of the last, opening week of camp, he's been working with the starters a little bit more too. So he seems to already have the lead track there. I think those ADPs need to be closer than they are and possibly flipped.
I think you're going to probably see that. I think that's absolutely the right call that you're able to say right now in July, which is true. There was a point, and I listened to John McKechnie and Mario do a lot of their podcasts every Thursday. John has been the token, I'm taking Chase Brown every single time. And when they were doing their drafts in February, I think John ended up getting like a 50% exposure. So you're on the right side of the smart people on this Chase Brown thing. So I think you're certainly on point. Let's go to another one of your sleepers here, Jake, among our group outside the top 100.
So outside the top 100, this is 129. It's a sleeper because he was useful, solid last year. Came on at times, but this year I think he can really expand upon the window here. And I'm talking about Rashid Shaheed, ADP 129. Part of what led me onto this was Jerry Donabedian trying to trade for him in the dynasty draft, which I have.
Very smart player too.
Exactly. Very sharp guy. That of course I turned that deal down. Here, but it started off, he was just a punt returner, right? A specialist. But now he has a real opportunity to be number 2 on the depth chart behind Chris Olave and in a Saints offense with Derek Carr, who, second season with the Saints. Now, of course, Saints have a new offensive coordinator, right? In Clint Kubiak, but at least he comes from a very highly successful 49ers coaching tree and system that turned Brock Purdy into something, and hopefully he can help repeat some of that here with the Saints here. So remember, Michael Thomas is gone. Not that he was much of a factor anyway. But after Olave and Shaheed, we're talking about the A.T. Perry, Cedric Wilson types here. Right. So I think he signed a 1-year, $5.2 million extension here. So they clearly have some value in his role. And then, of course, you have the all third-year receiver breakout kind of thing. He scored twice in the last 3 weeks to end last season. And, he did catch 46 of 75 targets for 719 yards and 5 touchdowns here. Now, that's not a super good catch rate. That's not something you're going to get from workhorse guy. And there's definitely going to be frustrations here because of his big play dependency, which, might make him somebody that you look for more in best ball here. But I think there's plenty of redraft value to have a couple of home run games in the year. And there'll be some disappointment to go along with that. But I think when it's all said and done, he has a 1,000-yard season and gets 70 catches maybe. I think that's reasonable.
Boy, you're expecting a lot of the Saints. I don't even know if Saints fans are expecting that much from their offense, but it's absolutely possible. If you play in the Scott Fishbowl at all, or you're listening to this, you're well aware of who Rashid Shaheed is, because the point total for that, giving a benefit to returners, has made Rashid Shaheed like a 6th-round pick. But everywhere else, I think there's rightfully some concerns. I think Rashid Shaheed's a really, really good player. Like, he's a good football player and certainly can be a great pass catcher. I like when the ball is in his hands. I think that's why he was a returner to start with. And we've seen really just about every time that there's an explosive play for the Saints offense, it's not Olave, as much as I love Olave, but it's Shaheed getting one of those deep passes. So I think there's certainly a lot of potential. I was all in on the Saints last year, so maybe it's burned a little bit, but yeah, I don't know if it's ever jaded, but I just there's like a recoil that I have when a team does not perform the way I think they will, and it's often attributed to coaching, and I wouldn't think Dennis Allen's gotten any better at coaching. So maybe that's where I have my biggest concern. The vibes are not good there. I'm not sure if you've been following Saints camp at all, but you have Marshawn Lattimore injured a little bit, wanting a trade. Alvin Kamara wanting some more guaranteed money in his contract. Well, the Saints aren't going to do that because they want to cut him next year. Ramczyk, their all-pro tackle, likely done for the season already. It's just – there's a lot of things that are making me really, really anxious about the Saints, but I also am all in on the Falcons. So maybe I'm wish casting to make sure the Saints are. That being said, if the Saints defense does stink and they can't run the ball, by default, even if you're a 3-win team, you're going to have to pass, and it can't just be Olave. So I don't mind it. I also kind of like A.T. Perry, so that's partially why I'm at that point.
I almost threw Kendrick Miller in as a running back sleeper here, but
it's another one that has gotten injured.
But he's too injured. He's injured again, and that's tough for now, because I think the clock's ticking on Kamara and Williams. Their little window of career productivity, whereas Kendrick Miller can kind of qualify as that post-hype sleeper, but that's only if he could stay healthy, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, Rashid Shaheed possibly coming in at number 2 as the number 2 wide out there. That'll be my guy.
Rounding out the last sleeper that I think is a one everyone's heard of before, but still has easy opportunity to outperform their expectation, at least their ADP, for me, is Josh Palmer. So I have my guys, and the listening audience is going to know this, obviously, in SiriusXM too. Josh Jacobs is going to be my guy this year. I'm going to pay an exorbitant price to get him in just about every league, because I really believe Josh Jacobs is going to be that level of fantasy difference maker. I will probably have Josh Palmer rostered in more of my leagues than Josh Jacobs. So I'm saying this because I really think Josh Palmer is going to be good fantasy value. Now, is it like Romeo Doubs last year, where he was confidently being taken outside the top 100, and I thought there's no way that makes sense, and it didn't? Doubs was not wide receiver 35, but he was wide receiver 32. It didn't really matter all that much. That's the floor for Palmer. Everyone wants to get in love with Lab McConkey, and rightfully so. I think McConkey's going to be really good. You can maybe talk me into QJ. It sounds like you're going to after I'm done with this as well.
Yeah, I want to hear, because I took him in our dynasty league, and I've got a good feeling about him. He reminds me of. Okay, I'm not making a Devontae Adams comp, but Quentin Johnson's biggest issue last year was drops, right?
Yeah.
Devontae Adams had some drops his rookie season. He got that fixed and sorted out real good. Quentin Johnson, when you say QJ, I just want to say that for the listeners.
Thank you. Yes,
Quentin Johnson, we list him as 4th on the depth chart right now, after Palmer, McConkey, DJ Shark, but I don't know necessarily why all that hype went away just because there's a new rookie receiver in here. I know how you like to you hate on draft pedigree a bit.
Yeah.
He was the 21st overall pick, though, so that is worth something, and you don't just give up on this guy here. I think
new regime, though, right? The guy who took him in the first round is now the general manager for the Raiders, and different coaching staff entirely. I think there's a lot of that stuff. Let me put the pin on.
Finish up.
The Palmer part is more important. We could say McConkey might do well. We could say Quentin Johnson's opportunity. DJ Chark is going to have a role as a deep threat, if nothing else. But when Keenan Allen and Mike Williams were gone and not playing or injured, Palmer was the guy that Herbert targeted often. This isn't going to be posted yet on RotoWire, but we did our training camp previews, and I write for the Chargers. So I put this together. I want to make sure I have this clear. In the 5 games that both Mike Williams and Keenan Allen were out over the course of Palmer's career, he's gotten 26 receptions for 354 yards and a touchdown. Palmer had a big breakout game in that annihilation that the Raiders did on Monday night. I think it was 63-0. And that was with Easton Stick throwing the football to Palmer and was catching like random passes at the end of the game. I removed that from the equation. Like that wasn't even part of my analysis when we're saying the 26 receptions for 354 yards. Herbert looks for Palmer often. And there is not a scenario where McConkey, Palmer, and Quentin Johnston or Chark are on the field where Palmer's off. Like he's going to play the entire time. That is the team's number one receiver. Now, if you want to say, Joe, what does the number one receiver look like for Jim Harbaugh and a Greg Roman offense? Fine. I get that. But it isn't McConkey who's getting drafted higher than him. Chark is one of those late throw guys that I probably should have included in there. He's not getting a lot of targets. Like we've seen Michael Crabtree back in the Niner days be a fantasy relevant receiver, and Palmer is a better route runner. And I think a guy that after the catch can be more explosive. So I really believe Josh Palmer is one of those receiver 3 types on your fantasy lineups that you can get for wide receiver 6 price right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if anything, he'll definitely be more consistent game to game than my sleeper Shaheed. But yeah, I'm just intrigued by Quentin Johnston here. I don't think that even new regime or anything. I don't think the 21st overall pick just gets cast aside like that here. I think there'll be a couple of big plays here with Quentin Johnston, and we keep reiterating Keenan Allen, Mike Williams both gone. There's so many targets up for grabs that Palmer probably gets the most. You're right, but I'm looking at QJ for
the only selling point for Johnston is his run blocking. It was one of the reasons why I thought the Packers should take him last year. Thank God I was wrong about that.
You say it like he's toast too. It's his second.
I know I do. I think he is toast. No, I watched the Packers game last year where the Chargers absolutely should have beat them, but Quentin Johnston missed a wide open 30-yard catch that would have been the difference the ball game. Okay, so the drop thing is a 1-year deal. Well, have you seen the training camp videos thus far? Because he's still dropping wide open over the shoulder catches. It's just if that was a problem, and Devontae had that for 2 years. So if that is your comp, that's fine. And Johnston probably sees the field because he's the best run blocking receiver on that team. But if you can't catch passes and can't get the trust of your quarterback in the case of Justin Herbert, and rightfully so, Herbert might not want to throw to him. There's just too many complications on that. Like, is the run blocking really that much better for a player that the front office and coaching staff is not at all invested in? That's where I kind of shrug my shoulders. I don't know. They drafted Jerry Rice's son as well, too, in the 7th round. I don't think he's all that good, but some smarter people think he could be a player on that roster. I would be shocked if that's the case. Darius Davis is like a return specialist, but has speed as well. Like there's a lot of archetype receivers that Chargers roster has that they don't have to rely on Johnston if that's the case. So
all right, yeah, I like the run blocking thing too. He's 6'4", 215, more size than anybody else that's projected to start too. So if he can get those drops together, there's something. But again, we're talking sleepers, so there's definitely some ifs in here.
The chat is booming with some sleepers. I love it. We have of course, our Roshan Johnson guy now all in a Cade Stover, Uncle Ted. I always appreciate it because he's going to get one of these right. If I was to correctly answer what you were saying, Jake, J.R. Jordan, the 3rd stringer right now for the Texans, is really that last kind of dart throw at running back that if Joe Mixon were to get injured and Dameon Pierce isn't your 4th round pick that you traded for, Jordan could actually be a really interesting name, but certainly way outside of most circles as well too. I love it. Keep it coming, guys. All the sleepers that you agree with or maybe don't thus far. Let's get a word from another one of our sponsors, ACME Real Fantasy Football. What's with fantasy football looking like an NBA All-Star game from a scoring perspective? Let's get real with ACME Real Fantasy Football. The top pro teams average around 28 points per game. That's how ACME Real Fantasy Football scoring is based. The system is also very accurate compared to actual game score. Each team drafts only 9 players filling the primary positions. Benches are only used for injured or bye week players, and that leaves 200 free agent guys available to improve your team. Weekly waivers give preference to the bottom of the standings. League rankings are always changing, keeping it competitive the entire season. ACME Real Fantasy Football also has a one-of-a-kind playoff format, selecting a new lineup each week. All teams are competing from week 1 through the entire Super Bowl. 12-team leagues start at $120. Go to ACME, ACME, realfantasyfootball.com and sign up today. As usual, Jake, we've been talking so much that we're going to have to probably fast track our final 4 sleeper candidates, but it's okay because I think that the ones that we focus on early on are really our key guys.
I'm going to do at the very end. I'm going to do my dart throws. Like, here's a name. Here's one reason why. Here's a name. Here's one reason why.
The chat actually correctly guessed one of your dart throws. That's great.
Yes, exactly. All right.
Cool. Well, go ahead and hit with your next one then, Jake.
Yeah. So I wanted to just bring up Keaton Mitchell, right? He's ADP's 223 here. I think Justice Hill is just a guy. And of course they have Derrick Henry too, but I think Mitchell, when healthy, is the perfect complement. Now, of course, the problem is he tore his ACL in December. And just to kind of look for some comp, Breece Hall tore his ACL in late October of last year, and he was pretty much ready for the start of the season. So, again, everybody's recovery is going to be different, right? But if that projects, I would expect Keaton Mitchell to start the year on the PUP list and miss the first 4 weeks, in which case he's probably going to be one of your roster casualties when you have to make a move early in the year. But if you can afford to hang on to him, I think he's somebody that can come on and contribute towards the end of the season, pass Justice Hill on the depth chart, offer a speed, explosive guy as that, the yin and the yang with Derrick Henry, if he's still healthy at that point. If not, who knows what happens with the workloads that he's been taking over the years there. Right. Keaton Mitchell could be a big play guy that could help out down the stretch here. Super sleeper is the way here, but he had a nice run from week 9 through week 15 last year, where we thought he's going to be a dude next year, and if he stays healthy, he's probably looking at I don't know. Well, if he stayed healthy, who knows what would happen with the Derrick Henry move, but he definitely have a higher ADP in this year's draft series.
It wouldn't be any different than Devon Achane. I mean, other than
it would,
Mostert and Derrick Henry.
You're exactly right. He would be the same ADP as Devon Achane, who is sitting.
He wouldn't be the same ADP because people are stupid.
Achane's 19, but it would be arguably top 50, and he would be a must roster for Henry owners. So, chances are if you take him, he might be a roster casualty for other injuries that happen. You don't want to necessarily. Alan Seslowski, who's on this channel all the time, always like to preach that injuries will find you. You don't have to go find injuries. But I'm just saying that come fantasy playoffs, he's a guy that you should be watching out for. And if you have a deep bench, I think he's worth a stash.
You quoted Alan. I'll quote Alan as well. Everyone likes to say this player is better in best ball. In this instance, I would much rather have Keaton in best ball if you are in a league that doesn't have injured reserve spots. If you are, I'm thinking a stake league, we probably can't roster Keaton Mitchell despite how big and deep it is. But in those instances where you can have Keaton Mitchell sit on your bench the whole time, there's opportunities. But I would run into the same issue that we had with Devon Achane last year. When are you comfortably playing Keaton Mitchell? I don't think there's a scenario. Maybe if Derrick Henry were to miss time, but he doesn't really miss a whole lot of time even at his advanced age for that position.
We have a nice comment in the chat here that the Ravens buys until week 14. Yes. So, I'm sure the injuries might find them at some point. There's
a lot of the teams. The Texans also are near the back end. There's week 12 and week 14, which, again, I'm thinking with underdog on my brain, but it's going to be really complicating for those advanced tournament leagues where you're doing those week 12, week 14, keep moving on. It's going to be really tricky. I like the Keaton Mitchell call in best ball, but in redraft, I'm probably not going that direction. Somebody in the chat mentioned Kamani Vidal for the Patriots. And there was, Audric Estime, who I think you could take later on. Estime is a rookie running back from Notre Dame for the Broncos. Both those players I would rather have more, and I think Keaton Mitchell is somewhere in between that spot. So just keep it in mind. Again, I love the chat mentioning some of these sleeper options out there. Keaton Mitchell was your call in deeper ones. I'm going to stick with the Ravens, but go with a different team. I mentioned Josh Palmer, somebody going to be rostered a lot. Yes, I know Vidal's on the Charger. I'm saying the other guy was too. It's fine. Rashod Bateman is the other sleeper option, and it's a much less potent version of the Kyle Pitts again scenario that we're running into, but I'm going to do it again with Rashod Bateman. I don't think the Ravens are a dumb franchise. In fact, I think they're probably one of the smarter ones out there. I don't think they're signing Rashod Bateman to an extension unless they think something is going to be possible for it. And in the case of Bateman, he's going to be now 2 years removed from that Lisfranc surgery he had on his foot. I'm not a huge fan of Devontae Walker, who they drafted in the 4th round. Everyone calls him Tez Walker. I sort of think that's sort of like the Tyquan Thornton for the Patriots a couple of years ago. Really tall, fast guy that can just do field stretching stuff. I don't think Walker is a 3-down player, but the only issue is you're probably not putting Walker in the slot. I know Zay Flowers is going to be in the slot, but you can have another guy there too. So I think Tez Walker and Bateman essentially play the same position. You're not drafting a guy in the 4th round to have him sit on the bench or just be a field stretcher. So that's my one issue. But you're signing Bateman to the extension, I think, because the Ravens are trying to get ahead of that receiver market where it's been insane for people that pop off. And I know the talent is there. I'm not just saying Big Ten bias, Jake. We have watched Bateman be really successful for Minnesota in his college career and hasn't really had opportunities due to injuries. So I'm very confident that if Bateman is healthy at the start of the season, you're going to be talking about him on the waiver wire show every Tuesday saying, well, you can pick him up, make a difference. He can certainly start. Yeah. So And you're way outside.
Oh yeah, I'll just real quick comment here. He wasn't really on my radar, but maybe you opened my eyes to him a little bit more. I do think Lamar Jackson in his second season under Todd Monken is the offensive coordinator here. The offense, he'll be more experienced and comfortable, and that offense will open up the passing game a little bit more. So yeah, of course you've got Zay Flowers number one, and like you said, Nelson Aguilar is and will be an annoyance.
Yeah, he will. Yeah.
So that makes it tough, but yeah, Bateman's back on the radar as someone that what are we looking at for his ADP here? Is it outside 200?
Underdog, he's like round 16.
207. Yeah. So as far as guys outside the 200 ADP go, I'd go take a look.
Just real quick with the commodity Vidal. So rookie, I think 6th round pick for the Chargers. They have Gus Edwards. They also have J.K. Dobbins on the team.
Joe's responding to people in the chat in case you're listening in the podcast afterwards right now.
And Vidal is also a guy that I think from a sleeper perspective, everyone's really in on. Really talented running back, and I'm saying this as a Chargers guy too. We don't know what the backfield looks like yet. So it could be Gus Edwards in the John Harbaugh and Greg Roman system who's just running the ball all the time. Dobbins is the best prospect if he was actually healthy all the time, but we don't know if that's going to happen either. So that there's a 3-headed backfield in Los Angeles, I think makes people a little bit concerned why Vidal is right around that same spot of, yeah, you could make a case for him being a sleeper, but really tricky with Gus Edwards and Dobbins there too. Yes, I am responding to the chat, but I think Vidal is one of those that certainly interesting too. Real quick, let's get a word from Fantrax, Jake. Is there something you wish your fantasy league had or features that are missing from your current league? Bonus scoring, custom schedules, or playoffs, deeper team settings? We'll look no further because we have you covered with our friends at Fantrax. Fantrax is the most customizable fantasy platform in the industry, offering the greatest fantasy experience for your dynasty, keeper, redraft, and best ball leagues. And Fantrax even offers fantasy football leagues, fantasy college fantasy leagues as well too. Create or join a fantasy football commissioner league. Invite your friends. Dominate your draft this season. Fantrax is the top dynasty fantasy football platform in the industry. Coming from another service, well, that's not a problem because Fantrax can easily import any of your current leagues and rosters. Ever if a trade go wrong or make a mistake in dropping a player, well, Fantrax Commissioner Tools allows you to undo any move with one simple click. Fantrax is running a special promotion that you don't want to miss. Sign up for free at fantrax.com/RotoWire today to enter for your chance to win tickets to any regular season NFL game with you in your entire league. That's an entire league opportunity to go to a game plus $6,000 in spending cash. Simply create a new league or bring over your existing leagues for more chances to win. Go to fantrax.com/RotoWire and sign up today. Fantrax, the home of fantasy sports. Jake, you had went way out there with your final sleeper pick. I commend you.
We definitely didn't quite. You for this we weren't on the same place with the dart throws here, and I know we entitled the show 8 sleepers, right? So I got to pick one, right? So why don't you take your one deep sleeper first here, and then I'll pick my one, and then throw out all my honorable mentions. All of mine are in the 450 to 550 ADP range. You know, guys that were taken in our 30-round drafts. But,
so I'm going to say
you go first with the more reasonable one.
I'm going to say 2, and actually one that's being mentioned off in the chat is Audric Estime, again, the rookie running back out of Notre Dame for the Broncos. There's been some bad Javonte Williams stuff so far, and I think Sean Payton's just a dunce. Like, he's way in over his head right now and uber confident with the fact that he can do whatever he wants in Denver. Fine. I don't think Estime is all that good, but if Javonte Williams really is just completely wrecked via all of the injuries, it's not going to be Samaje Perine. It's not going to be whatever Castaway, Jaleel McLaughlin's. I think Estime ends up getting the majority of the workload. Whether they'll be effective or not, I don't know. It kind of feels a little bit Zamir White's situation with Las Vegas last year, but you can get him second last pick, third last pick, and I think it's one to speculate on in end of July, early August. The other one, which I wrote down, is Khalil Herbert, and somebody in the chat actually mentioned him. I'm happy that I'm not the only one in on this. I don't think Khalil Herbert is a guy that you roster if he's on the Bears, but I would not be shocked at all if Elijah Mitchell for the Niners or Khalil Herbert for the Bears gets traded at some point this offseason. We just mentioned Zach Moss and Chase Brown. The Cowboys have Zeke and nothing else. I mean, there's probably 4 or 5 teams that at minimum could trade a 7th-round pick for a backup running back. I don't think Khalil Herbert or Elijah Mitchell get cut by their teams, but if they can say, hey, we'll get some sort of draft capital for these and then not have to have a roster construction issue, we should do it. And I think the Bears, after signing DeAndre Swift, they still have Roshan Johnson on the roster. There might be pushing out Herbert and, in the case of the Niners, Elijah Mitchell, who are both on the end of their final the rookie year deals. So I think from a comp pick perspective, teams could easily take a case on Herbert or Elijah Mitchell, and I like both those guys. But Herbert is the cheaper one, and therefore met your criteria as much as I could.
Gotcha.
With the late round.
All right. So yeah, so what I wanted to do, and I guess I'll count this as my 8th sleeper, is throw Isaac Guerrero out there here.
Cheater! I had him too. Stop it. That's not fair.
Yeah. Oh, was that the guy that you wanted to do?
Well, no. I have him drafted everywhere. I've been loving Isaiah Guerrero as well too. That's okay.
The thing is last year I drafted Christian McCaffrey in a deeper league, and I drafted Elijah Mitchell, and held on to him for the entirety of the year. Obviously, Elijah Mitchell was an entire waste of roster space, and even when he did get opportunities, he never actually came through here. So I'll throw a former Badger, of course, transferred, but continued to be successful at the collegiate level, Isaac Guerrero. That'll be interesting. So, that'll be 8. But I do want to throw my quick hitters out, my real quick hitters between 450 and 550. Jalen Hyatt came to mind because why are we just going to forget about a second-round pick already here? He had a couple of okay games last year. I think, with another year adjusting to the speed of the NFL level here, I think he can get there. Another second-round pick is John Mechie from the Texans. Now, I know they want us to talk about the Texans here in the chat here and the wide receivers. Unfortunately, not quite the topic for this episode, but maybe we'll do a listener question episode if we run out of spots here or topics here as we get closer to the season. But John Mechie's interesting. There's just way too much blockage ahead of him on the roster here, and of course, leukemia survivor. Everyone loves a great story. Possibly he a second-round pick that could be good. I also threw Jacob Cowing on here from the 49ers. If Brandon Ayuk ever gets traded or something happens at some point, I think he has a path to step in here. So Hyatt, Mechie, Cowing were guys that I wanted to mention. I guess Isaac Guerrero will be the deep 450 to 550 ADP dart throw there for me.
Uncle Ted, fave Texas receivers, get Dalton Schultz and Cade Stover. You're always going to be my Roshan Johnson guy, Uncle Ted, so I need Cade Stover to be up on that equation too. So I'm excited for that.
The All Ted team will do it.
That would be. I mean, the chat was great today. I
do appreciate all the comments here. We'll get as many as we in. We try to stay on the show topic here if we can, but sometimes we go off the rails too, because if we do Q&A the whole show, it's not quite fair for the podcast listeners afterwards, yes. Right? Yeah, but we do appreciate everyone coming on chat and giving us some extra angles at least to look at and extra super sleepers to consider and dive into. That's awesome.
Pushing over 500 live. If you want to join the conversation, you're listening to this later on and say, oh yeah, I would love to see what Uncle Ted has to say. Both of our Twitter accounts, normally around 2:00 Central Time, we're posting this tweet out, and you jump in the chat. I mean, this is one of those times where we have a lot to say about things that we don't quite know yet, and getting the opinion of others and different thoughts out there. I love it. This is what late July, early August podcast should be about, is what the listeners want to talk
4 weeks from now, we'll either be geniuses or we'll be headlining Old Takes Exposed, and I can't wait to see which one it is.
We got our over-under podcast coming up later on towards the end of August as well. We'll be doing our auction evergreen content as well as we get ahead of the RotoWire Stake League. So a lot of staple podcasts that we've done over the years, but anytime the listeners want to get more information out there or kind of talk about some certain things, we are open to it. So hit us up at JB Fantasy Sports, at least for me, or Jake at RotoJake on Twitter. That does it for us on this edition of the Tuesday podcast. We're back in around the same time. Again, if you want to be in the live stream commenting with everyone else, certainly feel free to join us, but looking forward to talking with everyone next week.